Chapter 12. The Passion, Death, and Resurrection. Efforts and Suffering Throughout the Life of Yahusha. I came to live among men, making of my life an example, a book. I knew all the pains, the trials, and the struggles, the poverty, work, and persecution. I knew being disowned by relatives, and ingratitude and betrayal. I knew of the long days of work, hunger, and thirst, mockery, loneliness, and death. I let all the weight of human sin fall upon me. I allowed man to scrutinize my spirit in my word and in my pierced body, where even the last of my bones could be seen. Being Elohim, I was turned into a king of fools, and some mortal remains, having even to carry the cross of ignominy and climb the hill to where the thieves died. There my human life ended as proof that I am not only an Elohim in word, but also in deed. When the hour approached and the dinner had been concluded, Yahusha had made his last recommendations to his disciples. He walked to the Garden of Olives, where he was accustomed to pray. Speaking to the Father, he said, "O my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. But above all, thy will be done." It was then that the one of my disciples who was to betray me came accompanied by the mob that was to apprehend me. When they asked, "Which is Yahusha of Nazareth?" Judas approached his master and kissed him. In the hearts of those men there was fear and tumult as they beheld the serenity of Yahusha, and they asked again, "Which is Yahusha?" Then I approached them, saying, "Here I am. It is I." There my passion began. They brought me before high priests, judges, and governors. They questioned me, judged me, and accused me of breaking the law of Moses and of wanting to form a kingdom that would destroy that of Caesar. Do you not remember how many times I showed my love, not only to those who believed in me, but also to he who betrayed me and to those who persecuted and judged me? Now you may ask me for what reason I came to permit all those humiliations, and I answer you. It was necessary to leave them complete freedom of thought and deed, so that the appropriate circumstances would exist in which to show myself, so that all would feel the mercy and love with which I came to teach the world. The betrayal of Judas. I did not move the heart of Judas to my betrayal. He served as the instrument of a wrong thought when his heart filled with darkness, and when faced with the faithlessness of that disciple, I showed my forgiveness. It was not necessary that one of my own betray me to give you that display of my humility. The master would have shown it in any circumstance that man might have presented to him. To that disciple, it corresponded to be the instrument by which the master showed his divine humility to the world. And although you may have thought that the weakness of that man was what caused the death of Yahusha, I say to you that you are mistaken, for I came to give myself to you completely, and if it had not been in that form, you may be sure it would have been in another. Therefore you have no right to curse or judge he who is your brother, who in a moment of confusion lacked love and faithfulness that he owed to the master. If you blame him for my death, why do you not bless him, since you know that my blood was spilled for the salvation of all mankind? It would be better for you to pray that none of you fall into temptation, for the hypocrisy of the scribes and Pharisees still exists in the world. When I was questioned by the Pontiff Saphias, saying to me, "I adjure you by the living Elohim, tell us if you are the Hamashiach, the Messiah, the Son of Yah," I answered him, "You have said so." The Passion of Yahusha. How many hearts that days before had admired and blessed my works, forgetting them, turned ungrateful and joined those who blasphemed against me. Yet it was necessary that my sacrifice be very great, so that it would never be erased from the hearts of humanity. The world, and you in it, saw me blasphemed, scourged, and humiliated to the point where no man could have been, but I drained the cup that you gave me to drink. Step by step, I fulfilled my destiny of love among men, giving all of myself to my children. Blessed are those who, in spite of seeing their Elohim bleeding and gasping for breath, believed in him. However, something yet greater still awaited me, to die nailed to a cross between two thieves, but so it was written, and so it had to be fulfilled for me to be recognized as the true Messiah. Concerning this teaching that I now give you, I gave already an example in the second era. Yahusha being on the cross, the Redeemer agonized before those multitudes that he had loved so much. Each heart was a door at which he had called. Among the mob were the men who governed multitudes, the prince of the church, the publican, the Pharisee, the rich, the poor, the depraved, and those of simple heart. And while some, from having seen his works and received benefits from him, knew who it was that died that hour, others, thirsty for innocent blood and eager for vengeance, hurried the death of he who they mockingly called the King of the Jews, without knowing that he was king of not only one people, but of all peoples of the earth and of all the worlds of the universe. Yahusha, directing one of his last looks toward that multitude, full of tenderness and pity, raised his plea to the Father, saying, "Forgive them, my Father, for they know not what they do." That look took in those who enjoyed his torment, just as it did those who wept for him, for the love of the Master, which was the love of the Father, was the same for all. When the day arrived that the mob, urged on by those disturbed by the presence of Yahusha, hurt and beat him, and they saw him bleed like a simple mortal under the effect of the blows, and later suffer and die like any human, the Pharisees, princes, and priests exclaimed with satisfaction, "There is he who named himself the Son of Elohim, who believed himself a king, and who passed himself off as the Messiah." It was for their sake, more than for that of any others, that Yahusha asked his Father to forgive those who, while knowing the scriptures, denied him and pointed him out as an impostor to the multitudes. It was they, in reality, who, being doctors of the law, when they judged Yahusha, did not know what they were doing, even while among the mob were hearts broken by the pain of the injustice they were witnessing, and whose faces flooded with tears before the sacrifice of the righteous man. It was the men and women of simple hearts, but of humble and elevated spirit, who knew who he was that had been in the world, and whom they were losing with the departure of their Master. He speaks to you, he who on the cross, agonizing, abused, and tortured by the mob, raised his eyes to them infinite, saying, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." In that divine pardon, I included and embraced all mankind of all times, for I could see the past, the present, and the future of humanity. I can say to you in spirit, in truth and spirit, that at that time I was looking upon you, who in this time are hearing my new word. When from the height of the cross I directed my last looks to the multitude, I beheld Mary, and referring to John, I said, "Woman, behold your son," and to John, "Son, behold your mother." The mob was blind, so John was then the only one able to understand the meaning of the phrase when I said, "I thirst," for it was the thirst for love that my spirit felt. And the two criminals agonized beside me also, and while one of them blasphemed and sank into the abyss, the other shone with his light of faith, and in spite of seeing his Elohim nailed to the ignominious cross and near death, believed in his divinity and said to him, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." To which I responded, moved by such faith, "Truly I say unto you, today you shall be with me in paradise." None knew the tempest that passed through the heart of Yahusha in that hour. The unchained elements were only a weak reflection of that which occurred inside that man. And so great and so real was the pain of the divine spirit that the flesh, feeling for an instant weak, exclaimed, my Elohim, why have you forsaken me?" If I came to teach men how to live, I also came to teach them to die, forgiving and blessing even the very ones that injured and martyred me, when I said to the Father, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." And when the spirit abandoned this dwelling place, I said, "Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit." The perfect lesson had come to an end. As Elohim and man, I had spoken. A moment was enough for Demas to save himself, and that was the last of his life. He spoke to me from the cross, and in spite of seeing that Yahusha, of whom it was said that he was the son of Elohim, was in agony, he sensed that he was the Messiah, the Savior, and committed himself with all repentance of his heart and all the humility of his spirit, and it was for this that I promised him paradise on that very day. I say unto you that he who sins unconsciously, but who at the end of his life speaks to me with a heart full of humility and faith, I shall make to feel the tenderness of my charity, which shall raise him above the miseries of the earth, to make him know the pleasures of a noble and elevated life. Yes, beloved Demas, you went with me to the paradise of light and spiritual peace, where I carried your spirit in reward for your faith. Who would have said to those who doubted that in the dying and bleeding of Yahusha there dwelled an Elohim, that in the thief who suffered on his right a spirit of light was hidden? Time passed, and when calm came again, many of those that denied and scourged me penetrated the light of my truth, and therefore their repentance was great, and their love for following me unshakable. In the second era, I pronounced some last words from the cross while my physical body was in a state of agony. Among my last phrases, there was one which was not understood during those moments or even later. My Elohim, why have you forsaken me? Because of those words, many became confused or doubtful, thinking that it was a moment of weakness that I had faltered. But they have not taken into account that was not the last phrase, that after it, I still pronounced others which revealed strength and enlightenment. Father, into your hands I commend my spirit, and all is accomplished. Now that I have returned to shed light on your confusion and to clarify what you have called mysteries, I say to you, when I was on the cross, the agony was long and bloody. The body of Yahusha, infinitely more sensitive than of all men, suffered a prolonged agony, and death would not come. Yahusha had already fulfilled his mission in the world. He had already said the last word and taught the last lesson. Then that tortured body, that torn flesh, on feeling the absence of the Spirit, painfully asked the Most High, Father, Father, why have you forsaken me? That was the sweet and sorrowful complaint of a wounded lamb to his shepherd. It was proof that Hamashiach, the Word, truly became man in Yahusha, and that his suffering was real. How can you attribute these words to Hamashiach when he is united eternally to the Father? Now you know that it was a painful mooning from the body of Yahusha, wounded and tortured by the blindness of men. But when the caress of the Most High rested upon that tortured flesh, Yahusha went on to speak, and his words were, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. All is accomplished. When Yahusha was on the cross, there was not a spirit which did not feel shaken before the voice of love and of justice of that one who was dying naked, similar to what they felt when he delivered the truth in his word. Whoever has analyzed the life of Yahusha has recognized that neither before nor after him has anyone existed who could accomplish a work like his, for it was a divine work which with his example will save humanity. I came meekly to the sacrifice, for I knew that my blood would convert you and save you. I spoke with love and forgave you to the last instant because I came to bring you a sublime teaching and to trace for you the path toward eternity with perfect examples. Humanity wanted to make me give up my mission with the fragility of the flesh, but I did not give up. Men wanted to make me blaspheme, but I did not blaspheme. The more the crowds offended me, the more pity and love I had for them. The more they hurt my body, the more blood flowed from it to give life to those whose faith had died. That blood is the symbol of the love with which I traced the path for the human spirit. I left my word of faith and hope to those who were hungry for justice, and the treasure of my revelations to the spiritually enlightened ones. After time passed, humanity became aware of the one who had been in the world. Then the work of Yahusha was considered to be perfect and divine and recognized as superhuman. There were many who shed tears of repentance. There were many spirits who experienced great remorse. If Yahusha, who was the way, the truth, and the life, ended his mission with that prayer of 7 words, saying in the end to his Father, Into your hands I commend my spirit, do you think that you, who are the students and disciples of that master, can leave this life without offering yourselves to the Father as a tribute of obedience and humility, and that you will be able to close your eyes in this world without asking of the Most High his protection, since you must open them in another? All the life of Yahusha was an offering of love to the Father. The hours that his agony on the cross endured were a prayer of love, intercession, and forgiveness. That humility is the road that I came to show you. Live imitating your master, and I promise to carry you to my bosom, which is the origin of all happiness. I, Hamashiach, through Yahusha, the man manifested the glory of the Father in his wisdom and power. The power was used to perform prodigies in favor of those needful of faith in the Spirit and of the light of understanding and of peace in their hearts. That power, which is the very strength of love, was poured forth upon those who were needy to be given entirely to others. So much so that I did not employ it for my own body, which also needed it in the supreme hour. I did not wish to make use of my power to avoid the intense suffering of my body, for upon making myself man, it was so that I would suffer for you, giving you a concrete, divine, and humane proof of my infinite love and pity for the small, the needy, for the sinners. All the power I manifested for others, whether in cleansing a leper, giving light to the blind, mobility to the paralyzed, or converting sinners and raising the dead, all the authority I showed before the crowds to give proof of my truth, by demonstrating my power over the elements and my authority over life and death, I did not wish to use for myself, allowing my body to live that passion and feel that pain. It is true that my power could have protected my body from all pain, but what merit would it have then held for you? What example understandable by men would I have given if I had made use of my power to avoid the pain? It was necessary to put aside my power at those moments to renounce the divine force in order to feel and live the pain of the flesh, the sadness before ingratitude and loneliness, agony, and death. That is why the lips of Yahusha asked for help at the supreme hour, because his pain was real, but it was not only the physical pain that wrecked the feverish and exhausted body of Yahusha. It was also the spiritual sensation of an Elohim that through the body was being mocked and ridiculed by the blind, ungrateful, and arrogant children from whom he was giving his blood. Yahusha was strong in the spirit that animated him, which was the divine spirit. He could have been physically insensible to the pain and invincible before the trials of his persecutors, but it was necessary that he cry and that he feel, that before the eyes of the multitude fall once and again, the strength drained from his fiber, and he died when the last drop of blood had escaped from his body. Thus my mission on earth was fulfilled. Thus ended the existence in the world of he whom only days earlier the people had proclaimed king as he entered Jerusalem. The saving action of Yahusha in the worlds beyond. Humanity had attained very little spiritual evolution during the beginning eras. Man had no knowledge about a spirit's destiny after its departure from earth, nor about its existence in the spiritual valley. Consequently, when those spiritual beings entered the spiritual valley, after having departed from earth, they were in a state of deep spiritual sleep and confusion until they gradually began to awaken. But when Hamashiach became man in Yahusha to give his teachings to all spirits, once he had fulfilled his mission among humanity, he sent his light to multitudes of spiritual beings, who from the beginning of the world awaiting his coming to be liberated from their confusion and to be able to rise toward the Creator. Only Hamashiach could eliminate that darkness. Only his voice could awaken those spirits and help them to evolve. When Hamashiach died as a man, his divine spirit created light in the spiritual dwellings and also in the tombs, thus enlightening those spirits who had dwelled in darkness, clinging to their material bodies. Those beings wandered that night throughout the world, becoming visible to human eyes as proof that the Redeemer was life to all beings and the spirit was immortal. Men and women perceived the signs and voices from beyond. The elderly and children as well were witnesses to those manifestations. And in the days before the death of the Redeemer, the spiritual light entered the hearts of humanity. The beings from the spiritual valley called to the hearts of men. And on the last day, when the Master gave his last breath as a man, his light penetrated every nook and cranny of both the spiritual and material dwelling places in search of those beings that had long been awaiting for him. Materialized spirits disturbed and ill, having lost the road, tied by chains of remorse and bearing burdens of iniquity, and other spirits that believed themselves dead but were attached to their bodies, all arose from the lethargy and rose to life. But before abandoning this earth, they went to those to whom they had belonged, to give testimony of his resurrection, of his existence. And with all this, the world witnessed these manifestations on that night of bereavement and mourning. The hearts of men trembled and children cried before those who had died some time before, and who on that day returned again for only a moment to bear witness of that Master who had descended to the earth to sow his seed of love, at the same time cultivated the spiritual fields inhabited by an infinity of spirits, who are also his children, and healed them and freed them from their ignorance. When I left my body, my spirit made its entrance to the world of the spirits to speak to them with the word of truth as I had to you. I spoke to them of divine love, for that is the true knowledge of life. Truly, I tell you, the spirit of Yahusha was not for a single instant in the tomb. It had many other works of charity to perform in other worlds. my infinite wisdom had for them, as it had for you, many revelations to manifest. There are those worlds where the spiritual beings do not know how to love, where they dwell in darkness and yearn for light. Today, men know that where there is selfishness and a lack of love, there is darkness. That war and passions are the key that locks the door to the road that leads to the kingdom of Yah. Love, in turn, is the key that opens the kingdom of the light that is truth. Here I have communicated through matter. There I have communicated directly with the elevated spirits so that they instruct those that are unable to receive my inspiration directly. Those elevated and enlightened beings are, for you, like the spokesman. The appearance of Yahusha after the resurrection. Days after my crucifixion, when my disciples were gathered around Mary, I made my presence felt, represented in a spiritual vision of a dove. In that blessed moment, no one dared move or say a single word. There was true ecstasy while they beheld that vision, and their hearts throbbed, filled with strength and faith, realizing that the presence of the Master who had apparently departed would be with them always in spirit. Why must you believe that my coming in spirit is without purpose? Remember that I, after my death as a man, continued to speak to my disciples, presenting myself in spirit. What would have become of them without those manifestations I awarded them, strengthening their faith and encouraging them for its fulfillment? Sad was the picture they presented when, after my parting, the tears did not cease to fall down their cheeks and sobs to escape at every instant from their chests. They prayed much, and the fear and remorse wore at them. They knew that one had sold me, another had denied me, and almost all of them had abandoned me in the supreme moment. How could they be the witnesses of the Master of all perfection? How could they have the courage and strength to confront men of diverse creeds and ways of thinking and living? It was then that my spirit manifested its presence among them to calm their pain, rekindle their faith, and set their hearts alight with the ideal of my doctrine. I humanized my spirit to the point of making it visible and tangible to the disciples, but my presence was spiritual, and look at the long-lasting and important influence those manifestations had on my apostles. My sacrifice was consumed, but knowing that those hearts needed me more than ever because in them a storm of doubts, suffering, confusion, and fear had been unleashed, I quickly came to them to give them one more proof of my infinite charity. In my love and pity for those students of my word, I humanized myself, taking the form or image of the body that I bore in the world, and let them see and hear me, and with my words ignited again the faith of those crestfallen spirits. It was a new lesson, a new form of communicating with those who had accompanied me on the earth, and they felt strengthened, inspired, and transfigured by the faith and knowledge of my truth. In spite of those proofs, of which all were witnesses, there was one who obstinately denied my manifestations and the proofs that I came to give spiritually to my disciples, and it was necessary even to permit him to touch my spiritual presence with his material senses so that he might believe. However, not only among my closest disciples did such doubts arise. No, among the multitudes, in the towns, cities, and villages, among those who had received proofs of my power and for the sake of those works followed me, confusion, anguish, questioning, surprise, and incomprehension surged because all had ended in that manner. I had pity on them all, and so as I had with my closest disciples, I gave them proofs that though I would no longer accompany them as a man on the earth, I had not left them. To each heart in each home or family and in each town, I manifested myself to those hearts that believed in me, making them feel my spiritual presence in a multitude of forms. Then began the struggle of those Christians who had needed to lose their master on earth in order to raise themselves up to preach the truth that he had revealed to them. You all know their great works. During the second era, when I made myself visible to my disciples for the last time among the clouds, when I disappeared from their sight, there was sorrow in them, for at that moment they felt to have been left alone. But then they listened to the voice of the angel, the emissary of the Most High, who said to them, O men of Galilee, what is it you see? The same Yahusha that you see ascending into heaven, you will behold descending in the same manner. Then they understood that when the Master should return to men, he would do it spiritually. My peace be with you.